back here.
Okay.
Discuss with your Amy County.
Okay. You guys, just wanna
Three.
take one and pass it around. There, yes, there's another. Bonnie had asked me, and this, I believe, started with Chairman Mahoney, but to look around at some of the other counties and cities to see what they might be doing for, local bidder preference policies. So between myself and the purchasing staff, we sent out, emails to all the different counties, cities, purchasing agents.
There you go.
So this is just a summary, of the ones that responded, and a lot of people did not respond. But if you go to the, second page or the back side, down at the bottom, you'll see the main thing I would point out is the results, and that is, of the 10 people that indicated they have a local bidder preference policy, 4 of those require the local bidder to reduce their bid to the non-local bidder. 1 awards it local if it's within 1%, and 5 of them said that they have a preference for local bidder, but they actually have no mechanism or no procedure for doing it. You know, there's no applicable rules or consistency or procedure to actually do it. So, and I did list some of the other counties and cities that stated that they have no bid preference policy. We got a lot of responses from out of state, but I didn't summarize those because I felt it was more important to look at on Michigan counties to compare ourselves to similar counties and cities of our size. So I summarized each one of them, and I did include the state of Michigan's policy at the top, just so you can be aware of what their policy is. And they basically have a reciprocal policy. There's of course a statewide rather than a county or a city. So that is pretty much what we were able to find out from all the email responses and things that people sent back to us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman. Don't we already have a policy in place, not limiting it to local bidders, but saying that if there is a consideration beyond pure economics, this board has the right to accept that bid?
I think that's pretty much what we do in terms of quality.
Whatever this board as a majority thinks is important.
You just did that a year or 2 ago with the vans for CMH, wasn't it? Is that what they were
We
for?
did. I took a look at some of the bids from last year just to give you an idea, because really, we have an evaluation team in process, and so the staff spends a lot of time looking at all of the bids. For example, and just goes back into 2012, Velasco Electric was awarded the bid for the emergency generator project. They were local, but they were not low.
Right.
But through the evaluation process, it was determined that they, best met our needs. But, there was 4 different areas where we didn't receive any local bids at all. There was 2 areas where we split the bid between local and non-local. So I just think it shows that when the bids come in, we take the time to look at them and evaluate them. And you always have the option of picking either the low bidder or not the low bidder. So I think it's a process, and
I have a question for Ted. One of the things that Commissioner Nash had suggested was some policy regarding the makeup of employees. And just curious, we can't do purchasing based on any race criteria, can we?
Well, I've actually done a legal opinion on that I would like to review with you Thursday, closed session, but I have addressed that.
Oh, you have?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a closed session on the agenda for Thursday to review that opinion.
Okay. I'm sorry, Jeff.
We have a closed session Thursday to review the legal opinion on that question.
And Ted, would that solely deals with bidding or hiring?
Well, basically, the same rules apply. It would deal with both.
Okay, and Ted, I had asked it, and I don't want to change that, but in the hiring, veterans, awareness or preference, federal act, would that be?
Well, that's different.
Okay, then let's not discuss it now.
Mr. Chairman, one other thing I wanted to comment on, if I could. I don't know if, I'm sure some of the members of the board will recall that maybe about 4 years ago, a group of local contractors came to the board meeting. And this had to do with the bid, I believe, for the 5th floor construction work. And they asked that none of the locals got the bid, and so they asked that the non-local company who did get the bid, have it, that bid be rejected, which the board did. The purchasing policy allows, or now reads, that you have the right to reject or accept all bids. The contractor who had been awarded the contract filed a lawsuit against the county, but was quickly dismissed.
If I recall, Ted, on that same issue, we rejected all bids, went out, and when the bid did come in, the second go around, it came in higher.
There is that.
No, seriously, that did happen,
That did happen.
after we rejected it.
Were you saying that the bid was rejected after we had accepted it?
Yes.
We'd accepted, but we could have rejected it, all the other bids and took our own if we had done that first, is that correct?
Yeah, the language basically gives you the right
Mm-hmm.
to reject or accept all bids.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, you can do that.
Right, okay. So
Mary,
that was a mistake.
Well, no, it was basically following current policy, except the low bid.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That policy was followed, the bid was awarded. A group of locals came to, the local contractors came to a board meeting and complained about it, basically. And on that basis, the decision was made to reject or to revoke the award to the low bidder.
Right,
So-
so they've done it first.
What I would add to what Ted just said was when it is evaluated by staff, we do not have a local preference policy, so staff does not take that into consideration. For example, with Belasco, that was pointed out that they weren't low bid. Some of the things that are in the specifications can imply that it needs to be someone local because we may have an hourly turnaround. If you're our electrical, you need to be here within 15 minutes of an emergency, something like that. That would be considered by staff. But as staff, we do not, because there is no policy for us that the board has directed us to do, we do not look at locality. However, there are things that it ends up being local because of those situations. And that's why when it comes to the board, that's why sometimes it's not local, but the board has reversed the decision of staff. We're okay with that. I mean, we're not offended by that. That's fine. We're just we can't look at local because we don't have a policy to follow. We follow policy that you create, and there isn't a policy right now.
But you do give us, a thing that shows where
Right.
it came from, so
Absolutely.
it's not like we
So-
don't know that
Right.
information.
Yes,
Right.
so if you
You
wanted to
provide all
change
the-
it at the board,
You
at
provide
the
all that
meeting, you
information
can,
to
you
us.
have that authority.
Mary, I noticed these bids had some top ends on them. Do these also go for, these preference people for capital projects? And I'm thinking, we do a jail, we're looking at a $30 million capital project, and 1% I see is pretty common. Well, take 1% of $30 million.
Most of them didn't have a cap. I have copies of some of their full policies, but some of them just responded, with a short email. But the ones that did send, their full policies, I don't recall seeing caps in any of them. I could go back and look.
500,000, but
Yeah, if they had it, I'd put it in there.
that's a huge amount of money if we,
Yeah.
on any capital project.
But you'll notice on that one, if you, the last sentence, they have the right to change their mind, they change the percentages as, you know, depending, and so I think that's where the size of the project comes in.
Looking at the city of Holland.
Yeah,
Okay, I have another question I thought was pertinent. The ability to, if that bidder wants to match the low bid, I've only seen that in 2. I mean, if you're the low bidder and you want to match that, it then goes to you if you have county preference.
yeah.
I actually think that's probably a better idea.
The ones that I looked up, a lot of them had that.
Yeah.
You have the
Yeah.
ability to match.
Does that violate, Ted? It'd be like me go out and negotiate. I could have Hughes Construction write me a little bit.
Well,
They're not
what, Mark had his
sticking
hand
with
up before I did.
Pardon me?
Do we have to add?
Before you can decide to do or not do what's local, you have to decide what's local.
Yeah.
And that can be really tough.
And that's virtually impossible. I suspect there's 9 different,
Versions of it?
yes.
Mhm, right.
And so that's the difficult part of this. And it also encompasses more than just this bid. I mean, we are, I go down the list. Buy American, buy, Pure Michigan, West Coast, whatever we do with the Michigan Corporation, which we didn't all vote, but the last board voted to go through. That's to decide, is a local company because they have a store here, or is a local company because they are owned here? Has the employees that the company has? I mean, there's so many options here. They've found it very difficult. I mean, states try to do this for years, and they find it virtually impossible to come up with a consensus that everybody agrees with, because everybody has their own ideas, and that's kind of why you have to do it case by case, because.
See, I would differ with that, only because you've got a page here now that says local preferences. They had to come up with some type of decision on what their local is, so you can't say it can't be done. It's just that we have to decide what that is, and that's for this board to determine. But I'm looking at studies that go across the whole United States that come up with a preference, but it just depends on what that body decides is gonna be considered local. Is local gonna be the Muskegon, is it gonna be the county, or is it gonna be the region? But that depends on what we're gonna decide. That would be, as this board. And, I'm pretty open to, any type of discussion, but I just think it's imperative that we look at the fact that what local preferences do for your community. And when you look at that, there's nothing but positives when you look at the economic impact that it can have in a community, especially when you're talking about building jobs and building support for your community. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that is considered really an economic boost, an economic stimulus. Because if you can keep those things local, it's a great benefit.
I don't disagree with you on that, but I agree with what Marv said. Is that company owned and operated right here in Muskegon County, the city of Muskegon? That would be fantastic. But they got a busload of illegals coming from somewhere. How is that stimulating your economy? Because that money's not staying here.
But again, it's gotta be what we decide is on.
Well, I understand that, but like you said, if it's owned and operated here and we say that's local preference and this is the guy we wanna give it to, we can't, dictate who he hires. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's not the point. What I'm saying is, if there's a company, and we'll have to set the standard on what's gonna be considered a company.
Why hear
And I
that?
think one of them was, I forget exactly how it's stated. But anyway, how we determine that company is considered a local company. And we can do that too in standards. It's, you know, you're never gonna have a perfect anything, I don't think, but you can decide what business is gonna be considered local, and these fly-by-night things. And, you know, we're talking about the jail, you know, I don't think we're gonna have fly-by-night companies working on our jail anyway. I hope we got a better enough staff to do the research to understand who's really a company and who's not. But that's all by criteria that we, you know, determine is gonna be.
Well, you say on that too, I think we had a pretty reputable company remodel the Hall of Justice, and they were very reputable companies, but not say that their employees were reputable. I mean, they're gonna go and get, they're the ones that are filling their pockets. If they can pay you $5 and pay him $2, guess what? He's getting the job and you're not.
Well, hopefully that's why we go with prevailing wage, so you don't have that kind of thing going on.
Mr. Chair, you know, as a former road commissioner and now a county commissioner, one of the things that I want to see happen is I want to see our local businesses prosper. I want to see them do well. But at the same time, as an elected decision maker, I don't want to be handcuffed by a policy that's going to take that decision making away. I want to be able to answer for the people that are in my voting district, and I want to answer for the people in Muskegon County. And if having a policy in place that's going to restrict that, I don't think is a good thing for our local businesses or our residents of our county. And I'm adamantly against having any sort of policy than what we have right now. Leave the decision making in our hands on each individual basis, because each individual situation is going to require a decision based on that. And I just don't want to see us be handcuffed by that.
And I have to agree with Commissioner Sabo too, for a couple of reasons. One is that when we look at a local preference, one thing I think we have to remember is the biggest local is our taxpayers. And to charge them more for a project is in some ways not fair to them. You will be keeping more money in everybody's pocket or putting money in a few pockets. And I'm just gonna use this as an example. And I'm not picking on anybody, but for example, in my business, we use Muskegon drywall when we need 3 sheets of drywall. But Muskegon Drywall hardly has any employees, but they do have a store here. But they don't buy their product from here, they buy it from Gypsum Supply in Grand Rapids. So really all I do is just pay a markup, because I can go to Gypsum Supply in Grand Rapids and buy my board cheaper. And it's exactly the same board, and they're either gonna bring it to Muskegon Drywall and I'm gonna go pick it up, or I'm gonna order from Gypsum Supply and they're gonna bring it to me. And I think in a situation like that, that would be something that definitely needed to be looked at individually, because, I mean, you're only benefiting 1 or 2 people, and you're paying a lot more for the product. And as far as the jail goes, being a contractor, I know what a huge responsibility and a huge project that's gonna be. And it's not gonna be possible to buy the things that we need to build the jail locally, because we don't make drywall here. We don't, you know, I mean, they're gonna have to come from somewhere else, and we don't have, and it's gonna be a multi-year project. I mean, just the cost of a local preference in that job could make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's not possible to even buy locally. All you're really doing is be paying the local contractor himself that money, and it wouldn't necessarily keep it here or increase the amount of money that was spent here or the people that live here that were employed here.
Mary, I can assume from this, and then I assume that after reading what Charles gave me, and we did a lot of homework on that most municipalities do not have preference policies. How many did not respond to you?
We had a lot that didn't respond as well, so,
You know,
Yeah, that's
you
really
know,
not
we
true.
sent it out.
If you look at our state and our counties, there's a lot that's not listed on here, because I got more than what she's got. And there's some that are not listed, and actually when you go from counties to municipalities, it's actually more in municipalities than it is in the counties. When you look at the country, there's over 39 different states that use a local preference statewide. So, you know, this is something that's not new. Matter of fact, if you looked at read that article that I gave you, this started back with George Washington, back in the day. So this is not something that came across as new, this is something that was established in trying to make sure that you keep dollars home and build with your community the funds that you have. And like I say, George Washington started that on his own, trying to implement that to get people to support local businesses within this country because he didn't want those dollars going back home to support other things. So this is the same mindset that we're trying to do. With not having a policy, we're not telling our community that we want that. She just alluded to the fact that we don't get a lot of local businesses bidding on stuff because they gotta compete with the people outside all the time. And a lot of times, they've got more of the upper hand and they've got the dollars to do so. All this does, it doesn't change our policy. It sends a message to our community. This does not change our position to be able to change any of these bids to accept or decline. We still have that. That stays in place. That does not change. But the thing that we do not do, we do not tell our own community that we are supportive of you and we do want you to move forward and hoping that you can put in a qualified bid that would give you the opportunity to have it. We're not handing anybody anything. But it's making people sharpen up their pencil. And not only does it does that, but if you look at the bidding research that was done, anytime you add a preference on there, it usually makes other businesses even tighten up their bid even more. So what it does, it adds more competition to what we have already. So, you know, I can see, you know, you guys maybe made up your mind that you don't want to have this, but I just see it as a blow to the community.
Mr. Chairman, this is difficult. This is a core issue for Charles. It's been his issue for long before he came here.
It's not for me, it doesn't affect me.
But this is the same attitude started World War I, started World War II. It is, if in fact you want to answer the questions that Charles is raising, it would require this group to determine what is local. Then it would require a statistical research by somebody to see how many times that would change local biddings. Then you need to find out. Otherwise, it's just emotion, vote one way or the other, and it's an issue that correctly has been here since there's been tribes.
I have another comment. You know, one thing that we need to think about on this, I really like the way it stands now where we have that option to look at it. And a couple of those reasons are, if we put in a local preference policy, the counties around us, Ottawa, Kent County, neither one of them have one. You know, would that say to them, well, if they're not gonna buy from us, we're not gonna buy from them?
They actually have policies.
Because they told Mary they didn't.
They do have policies.
I can only tell you what people emailed back to me.
And it says here, they
emailed me-
responded, but they have no bid preference.
Well, and they may not be counties, but a lot of their local municipalities all have
And that's
preferences.
possible. But
The
one other
city of
thing,
Grand Rapids does.
one other thing that you have to remember is, and I can tell you this from personal experience, I will bid for you every time until about the third time, and the third time you give it to somebody else and I'm low bid, I'm gonna say, I'm wasting my time. All I am is just a hammer to get that guy to lower his bid, because you're gonna go with him anyway. And I think you will hurt our chance to get good competitive bidding by doing that. And if, you know, you're right about one thing, our local businesses should have an advantage. But they should have an advantage because they are here, they are local, they don't have as far to travel, they have local people that don't have to travel. They should be competitive within themselves, not because we give them that opportunity to pay them more, but they should. And I think too, part of maybe what we need to do as far as local preference is to make sure that every single local business is notified to bid. And if we're gonna go out for cars, I noticed on the agenda for today, there's a list of cars that Community Mental Health wants to buy. There's no bids at all from Benton, and they're one of our biggest car dealers. Now, whether they chose not to bid, or didn't have the cars we wanted, or didn't know the bids were going out, that's something that the county commissioner in that area could say, you know, hey, we're gonna be bidding on cars, you guys need to pull up this website and look at it. You know, or if the purchasing department could just shoot all the county commissioners an email that says, we're gonna be going out for this, we could accept their responsibility on behalf of our constituents to make 3 phone calls or 5 phone calls and say, hey, the bid's coming up, you might be interested in bidding on it.
Commissioner Scarlett? I thought when this came up, a few weeks ago, I thought we were gonna discuss it at that meeting, and then it got tabled, so I did a fair amount of reading on it. Actually, it was surprised how much time it took, besides reading what you
Right, what
passed out.
Charles used
I
it.
found a lot more about it. One of the things that I found was, now, there's an organization called the National Institute of Government Purchasing. Now, this is not, these are not the sellers, but these represent the upper purchasing officers, and they called it an impediment to cost-effective procurement of goods, services, and construction in a free market system. So they were definitely opposed to it. Another thing is, as far as not having local bidders, I just got a few things I want to say. I know, because I probably did as much of this as anybody in my years as a business owner. But I knew that some people were willing to sell, say, some fairly expensive product and make maybe $100 on it. And I look at that and say, well, I gotta go deliver it 100 miles, and it just isn't worth doing. So you may not bid on it. On the other hand, what Susie was saying, I know in the case of construction work, I think large construction firms have something they call a mobilization fee that they add into the bid. And I know I talked to Jackson Murphy about it one day, and he won a bid in Wisconsin. Not because he made any money on it, because he wanted to keep his guys busy, just so he could pay them. He didn't want to lose them.
And we do that a lot too.
But I mean, just to move his equipment to Wisconsin,
Yep.
it's a major expense. And then, for example, if you get a job that's 100 miles away, you can't expect your employees to commute without giving them something for it. So these are all things that, one of the things I did look at, I'm sorry, I had a medical phone call, and that's why I left the room, but one of the policies I looked, there's different ways of doing local bids. One is to let a local bidder, if he's within whatever percentage on that sliding scale, to match the low bid. I guess I could live with that, but I kind of don't like it, because I know that, say I did a bid, I would do a bid for, it might only take me an hour to do it, but some of these bids take weeks to do.
They do.
Like to remodel the 5th floor. I mean, that's no little, okay, I think it's gonna be
Right.
$20 a square foot, or 200, or whatever it is,
Right,
I
and,
mean.
and if you do that, it makes it so the other guy doesn't even have to bid. He knows he's local, he's gonna get the chance.
Well, you're still gonna have to bid on it, but I know Charles is saying, well, maybe it'll make those guys sharpen their pencils some more. I don't know how much profit there is in those jobs. I suspect if it's like everything else these days, there's not a lot. I've been, in your first term, you brought this up 4 years ago, I think, or your first